Quick one before we start. If you're a birth worker and you don't know what your next steps in your business are, whether you're just getting started or you've been at this a while, I've made a free quiz for you. It shows you what stage your birth biz is actually at and what to focus on next, without any generic advice. It'll only take you a minute to complete, and the link is in the show notes. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast. I'm your host, Niamh, and today I am joined by Orla Nealis, who is a birth and postpartum doula, birth reflection facilitator, and has many other hats, including being an antenatal educator in training. But I will let Orla tell you a little bit more about herself as we go on. So I've been working with Orla for a little while, and we're going to talk about her journey into this work and how her business has developed over time. And really, we'll just see where else this conversation takes us. So Orla, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So can you take us back to what brought you into birth work? Why did you change careers?
So I had my first baby in July 2020, so the height of the pandemic. And I had anticipated staying at home for as long as possible. I knew I wasn't going back to work afterwards. So I was in HR and finance before this. Very different area of work. But I knew that when I had my first child, I was going to stay at home as long as possible. And then I didn't know how many children I was going to have, and I planned to just stay home with them. But my start with my first baby was not great. Obviously, having your baby during the pandemic was not an ideal way to start into parenthood. And I just found there was just so much missing. I ended up with quite a traumatic start with breastfeeding, with labouring alone in the hospital for a long time, and then having to stay in while my husband was at home, wondering, was his wife and child okay? It was a lot. So came home, I just didn't have a clue what was going on. And because I felt so much had been taken from me during my birth, I then was so determined to make breastfeeding work with no supports available to me. And I didn't know where to turn either. So we had one visit from the public health nurse. And then after that, we were just triple feeding for 4 months. So I pumped for 4 months until my baby eventually learned how to latch. And it was literally just through sheer determination and stubbornness. And it was only really afterwards that I realised that there were supports there that I just didn't have access to, and nobody kind of pointed me towards them during the pandemic. And I just thought, like, how could somebody become a mother and not have support around them, like not have anybody telling her where to go and how to feed her baby and how to take care of her baby? It just wasn't good enough, that women could just be left to fend for themselves and figure out this huge transition alone. So I did get in touch with Quidju fairly quickly. There was nothing happening with Quidju at the time, apart from a few branches were doing online meetings. But I very quickly just decided to jump in. I was like, I want to be a breastfeeding counsellor. I've never been to a meeting. I don't know really much about the organisation, but I need to find a way to support other mothers, because I can't let what has happened to me happen to other people. So by the time my first baby was 8 months old, I started the roller coaster of trainings of various different things. So he was only 8 months old. And as I said earlier, I had planned on staying at home, just enjoying my children for as long as possible. But no, I was already swept up in this world. So I started my breastfeeding counsellor training, my parent support training with Quidju. So I started off supporting parents in a voluntary capacity, and then that just snowballed. So I've been training ever since, at least one training on the go at all times. And here we are today.
Absolutely. And I know you said you had your baby during the pandemic and the lack of support was even more apparent then, but we do still see that a lot of parents don't have that support that they need, and that we're not really setting up society in a way that shows parents that actually we do need support and it's okay to need support, and that it's really beneficial for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, like in so many other cultures, when you have a baby, you're surrounded by the women in your community, by sisters, neighbours, mothers. And in Ireland, we're just not set up for that anymore. We've gone so far away from that kind of way society should be set up, where everyone's kind of supporting and teaching and passing on the wisdom. And now we're just left to kind of fend for ourselves in a lot of ways.
And you said you started in a voluntary capacity. So you were doing your volunteer work with the charity Quidju. And then you also mentioned that you started doing lots more training. So what brought you into doing this as paid work?
So I suppose it got to a stage where my volunteering had taken up so much of my life, and I felt in some ways so fulfilled, and then in other ways I felt limited, and that I felt I wanted to be able to do more. So rather than once a week being at a breastfeeding meeting there to kind of support women on the go, I wanted to be able to kind of be on the ground with them in the trenches, and that's where postpartum work really called to me. So I started looking into kind of postpartum doula work. I also got pregnant with my second baby and went from having that very medicalized hospital birth to having my first home birth experience, and so began my obsession with birth as well, and realizing that there's so much more support out there even in birth as well, and pregnancy too. And I also started to understand the importance of continuity of care and being able to have the same support throughout pregnancy, birth and postpartum, and how we're lacking in that area in a lot of ways in Ireland. But that maybe there was a way that I could do that for women in a different capacity, non-medical. So that's where I started to look into birth doula work, postpartum doula work, and then also supporting people as an antenatal educator as well. We're kind of going through the whole journey.
It sounds like you mentioned when you were working in HR and finance that you had already made a decision when you were having your babies that you were going to kind of give up that job and stay at home. So I'm guessing there wasn't an idea that you were going to start some sort of business within that as well. So was it purely just the passion that brought you to that point, or was there anything else?
I think it was the passion. I think it was, like many birth workers, we're coming at it from a place of passion for the work, for supporting women and families. And then I found personally anyway that I started to do the trainings, and then I was like, well, wait a second, how do I find people? How do I let people know that the support is there? So I then had to kind of find a business head as well. And that has been, a whole different area of learning for me.
Definitely. And what was then the first paid service that you set up?
So I, as I said, was supposed to be at home with my babies, and I just had no control. I just needed to do something. And so it made me have to get very creative, because I was pregnant with my third baby while doing doula training. So I knew, obviously, I can't be a support for other people in the ways I want to, because I kind of need to be doula to myself at the moment. I'm pregnant and having my own next postpartum journeys. I got creative and kind of came at it from a different angle, and I started with virtual support. So I was kind of doing both. I was doing antenatal sessions one-to-one for certain topics, and then I was also doing a lot of postpartum support. Literally just a phone call here and there, sometimes a visit if they were nearby and it wasn't too disruptive to my own family's life. And then as my baby got older, I was able to grow that.
And what was it like then transitioning from kind of that volunteer support into asking for money?
Yeah, definitely a big transition. And I think a lot of us feel that way, where we're so used to being able to give so much of ourselves and not asking for anything in return. And then you realize that more and more of your life is being taken up by this. And that's great. We love it. But we also do need to kind of put a different hat on and understand that our families deserve the income. We deserve the income as well as being able to provide for other families too. So yeah, it was a big kind of mental shift for me. And there was a lot of blocks there in my head as I first started to charge,
Yeah, and I think I asked the question because I know how challenging it is for everybody, and the challenges I had with that myself as well. But it is really important that we do recognize that we are giving of ourselves, and we're giving up time that we could be spending with our own families. We're giving up time that we could be spending doing things for ourselves to give to other people, and that we do deserve to be compensated for that, just like everybody else.
Yeah. I think it can be a problem with a lot of women in general, and feeling, we just have to give, and that wanting to receive is almost not acceptable, and sometimes that can be some mental work that we have to do for ourselves. But yeah, you're so right. You need to be able to see the value in what you're doing and the value in the time that you're giving to other people.
And the value in your expertise, that you have spent all of this time, energy and money doing various trainings and learning different things, so that you can appropriately support the women and families that you want to support. So we do need to be able to value that. And I know your business in lots of ways is still in its own infancy, in that you've been up and running about 16 months, but you've moved quite quickly in your business, which has been brilliant to see. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey and how things have gone, the hard bits, what support you got, just whatever you feel is relevant?
So it has been quite the journey, and I'm still in a state of shock of how is this happening? How has it happened so fast? What is going on? And then kind of balancing it with, well, you've put in the work. You've, worked so hard for this. But so I started off, as I said, with just virtual support, and I had to kind of grow things gradually as my own children kind of got older and could be away from me for a little bit longer, and then trying to find childcare that would suit flexibly and all of the rest of it. But this time last year, I was so grateful to book even 1 or 2 clients a month, and for really small, quick sessions. And now I'm fully booked until July, I think. Yeah, so it's really, really snowballed. I gave it my absolute all. I learned as much as I possibly could. I've been devouring books on business, mostly written by women, and I found that to be really essential. And if they have children, that's even better, because we're not playing the same ball game as a man in his early 20s,
Absolutely.
So I've read basically every book I can get my hands on. I've listened to podcasts. I started off listening to your podcast as well, and I was like, I need more, so I joined your Birth Biz Besties group, and that has been really helpful. And the knowledge I'm gaining there and the support from other women as well. And then, just learning as much as I can about marketing and running a business. And I've thrown everything at it. I've tried so many different avenues of marketing and trying to connect with people and connect with other people working in this space. And here we are.
What do you think has been like the most successful thing that you've done that has really helped you get clients? What would you put that down to, or is it a multitude of things?
Well, it's definitely a multitude of things. And as I said, I kind of threw everything at it to see what would stick, to see what would work. So I've changed tactics quite a few times over the last year, but it's been a combination of really learning how to market, but also, and a bit of woo here, getting my mindset right has been the absolute game changer. It really has. And I cannot shout that from the rooftops loud enough, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a call with someone who's looking for some support, some coaching the other day, and we were chatting through, and she had loads of practical questions, about how do I do this and how do I do that? And I always have to bring it back. I'm like, listen, the hardest thing that you're going to actually have to do is work on your mindset and be able to kind of overcome those challenges around pricing, around putting yourself out there, around the idea of marketing, all of these, what other people might think. So your mindset is really a big key. What would you say has been the biggest challenge or lesson that you've had?
I think it's like with anything that kind of takes more time than maybe like an instant snap of the fingers. I had to put a lot of trust in the process and trust in the consistency that was required. I think I reached out to you about 8 months ago going, Niamh, when am I going to know that it's safe? When am I going to know that I can trust that my income is somewhat secure? You gave me some good advice and insight, but it really just came down to the trust in the process and the consistency. And that was hard. I definitely had months where I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm putting in so much time and energy, and nobody knows I exist. Nobody knows I have this service, and I know I have so much to offer to people. How do they find me? So that was difficult. But now it's at the stage where I'm almost at the stage where I'm like, I don't really need any inquiries until maybe 2 weeks from now, just slow down a little bit, which is unbelievable. I'm in shock, that has happened.
And it is a wonderful place to be, because it does give you that sense of safety that you were seeking a few months ago. But also it means that you can start to refer out. And that, for me, that always feels really good to be able to give work to other people as well. And I know you've built a lovely community of other practitioners around you that you'd be able to do that with.
Definitely, yeah. And it has been so lovely because a lot of the clients that have found me through other birth workers or other people working with similar clients. So it's so nice to be able to refer people back to them or to new people I'm meeting and getting to know.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we always talk about in the collective and in the Birth Biz Besties about, you know, the idea of community over competition, and really that we are colleagues, not competition with each other, and working together is the most important thing. And I feel that it's not just important for ourselves, like it's not just important for us to be in community. I think it's also really important for the families that we serve to know and understand that the professionals in this area are supportive of each other and that we work together in this space.
Absolutely, definitely. That, you know, they can feel held by many rather than we're all kind of fighting to keep clients within our own. You know, it's not helpful for anybody to be in a competition with those around you.
And in the idea of kind of putting ourselves out there and that this marketing from the outside, it feels that your social media presence has been very natural and it comes across as very calm and very you. But I'm wondering in the background what the struggles have been with that.
So I kind of grew up with social media, honestly. I was kind of, you know, the tail end of my teen years, it kind of really came into its own, and I've had various different uses for social media over the years and a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. I will say the more you see me on social media, the less I'm actually working. So right now I'm barely on social media because I'm just working, and finding that balance is so difficult. So I can't show up consistently in both ways yet. I've tried to batch make content like Niamh always, you know, advises. I don't know if I'm just an over perfectionist or what, but it just takes me so long to make posts. I love making them. I love, you know, spending time on Canva, but I have struggled with being consistent on social media while also serving my clients, you know. And then the other thing that I have noticed, and as I said earlier, like I've thrown everything at it trying to find clients. I have found that social media is not always the best way for me to get clients. It hasn't been the most important source of clients. So while I do definitely see the value in it, it's not always essential in my business anyway.
I agree. And definitely once you've started building up a little bit of a reputation and you do have those referral networks where people, other professionals are referring, but also your previous clients are referring as well, the social media aspect becomes less important because you're not trying to build that initial kind of visibility. What I do find for a lot of people though is that there needs to be some level of maintenance, just because otherwise then we see these dips falling off. It doesn't have to be like high level maintenance, but some level of maintenance, because I found with some clients as well that they might have heard about me. So someone has said, you know, Niamh's a great lactation consultant, but then they'll go and check out my social media page to see who I am. And I've seen this with other clients actually, because I'm relatively consistent, that their drop off starts to happen. And I say, well, if you haven't been online in 6 months, people probably think you're not doing the work anymore. And so someone might just look and say, oh, they haven't posted in 6 months, they're not active, and then not reach out because an assumption is made. So I feel a little bit of maintenance is helpful.
And no, that is absolutely true. And even on my slower months on social media, I'm still posting about 5-6 times on like your main feed, and then I'm on stories every other day, you know.
Yeah.
And you're so right. Like if somebody passes you on through word of mouth, your social media and your website are places for people to go before they even get in touch with you to kind of get to know you a little bit better. Or say if somebody messages me on Facebook, and I don't even have a Facebook page, which is another problem. But if someone messages me on Facebook asking me about doula support and they don't really know much about me, I find sending them my social media gives them a chance to get to know me a little bit better, which is so important when they're, you know, investing in this kind of support.
Absolutely. When we're asking people to invite us into their most vulnerable time and space in their lives, I do think it's important that they do have some sort of idea of who we are and what we stand for, and will they like us or not. And you know, some people don't want to get as far as a discovery call to figure that bit out. You know, they want to have a little bit of pre-work done.
Totally fair.
So in your business now, and you've said, you know, you're at that point where you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm not sure I want any more inquiries to come in straight away because I've got so much going on. What kind of tips would you give to other people who maybe are a little bit earlier on in their journey?
So many. There's so many things. I think fully believing in the work that you do and knowing how important it is that people need to find you, that you're doing people a disservice by not putting yourself out there, because they can't access the support they need if they don't know you exist. And so being willing to be visible and willing to put in that effort until you get to the point where it does flow a little bit easier. Because it can be an uphill battle. It can feel like, wow, I'm putting in so much effort, so much time for not much in return. But I promise once the momentum gets there, it's just like, whoa, where am I? What's happening? How did this happen? How did I get here? It's the best feeling. Knowing that, you can provide the services that you've put so much effort into training for and that people need is just, it's worth it.
Definitely. And I think that's something that sometimes is missed. We want to serve, we want to be able to do the work. It's the reason why we do all the training. It's the reason why we set up our businesses. But if we're not willing to tell people that we're available, then it's unlikely that we're actually going to be able to help very many people.
Yeah. And I think, as we said earlier, like, we come into this work from a place of passion for supporting families. And it's not necessarily that we wanted to be business owners, but we have to go hand in hand. And I think understanding that and just accepting that from the beginning, that if you want to do this work, there will be an element of having to run a business, and not being allergic to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people struggle with kind of time and having the time to kind of do the business end of it, plus have a family, plus, exist in life. But you've done all of this while raising 3 very small children. So how have you managed?
My house is upside down. At the start, it was a lot harder because I couldn't really afford to, outsource anything. I had to raise my kids. I didn't have childcare. I had to do the school runs and the lunches and the bath and whatever, and somehow trying to keep myself sane and healthy at the same time. Over time, I really understood the value of investing in my business in a different way. So I thought that would mean like investing in a photo shoot for marketing or investing in someone to build a website and all of that. But actually what it has meant for my family is investing in support for our family. So getting a cleaner, getting, really reliable childcare that's flexible, and freeing up time for me to be my best self in all the capacities so that I can show up for my clients, I can show up for my kids when I'm there, and I don't have a million tabs open in my brain at all times. And then also giving myself a lot of grace. So yes, I am, like, my kids are all under 6. I've got 3 children under 6. I'm running a business. I'm getting my diploma in antenatal education. There's just a lot going on, and understanding that I'm not going to realistically be able to give all of those areas my all every single week. And so sometimes we have to pick and choose and be okay with done is better than perfect. And we're moving forward, even if slowly.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important point about that. It doesn't have to be equal all the time in the different areas.
Yeah.
I talk about that kind of pendulum swing. Sometimes it needs to be more family, sometimes it needs to be more business, sometimes it needs to be more just yourself. Sometimes it's balance, it's triangle in between all 3. Yeah. But this idea of balance, doesn't really exist, because we don't want or need these things to be equal at all times. There are swings and roundabouts, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Balance is a myth.
Definitely. In where you're at in your business now, how do you structure it in a way that you can do the client work and still do the admin and business end of things as well?
So last year, while things were quiet and while I was starting to kind of build a little bit, but still not fully feeling that the work was consistent, I did invest in a lot of time into setting up processes, setting up systems for my business. So when somebody inquires, what is the step-by-step process they'll go through until they're actually booked, and making sure that I have like template emails that I can personalize a little bit, or making sure that my contracts are ready to go, making sure that I know exactly, how to let people know what the next steps are. Just lots of different systems in place to try and streamline things as much as possible. I would eventually like to invest in some kind of software to help me automate even further, but this has been the level that has gotten me to where I am already. So that it's very straightforward for the clients as well, because they don't want a lot of back and forth. They want things to be very clear. It makes you look a lot more professional and trustworthy as well. But yeah, that has been mostly how I have balanced it. And also setting aside some time as much as I possibly can. It's not always a set half day per week as maybe I would like to do, but definitely sometimes I get childcare in just so that I can sit down for a few hours and work on some business admin. And that has been helpful to just knock out as much as possible.
I think that's a really good tip that you gave there, that when things were quieter, that setting up those processes has really paid off now. So for some people, when they're not getting lots of inquiries, it might seem like a bit of, why would I bother with these processes? Because I can handle what's happening already. Yeah. But then as things get busier, it's been so helpful for you. And now at the point where you're at now, the next step probably would be some level of automation where it's coming at. Because again, you've got to a point where you're doing really well with your systems, but then you could take back some more time probably with some level of automation. And the point I wanted to bring into this is that it doesn't have to be everything all at the start. That as our businesses grow, we can start putting in the things, preempting them or putting them in as needed, because a lot of people struggle when they're going to start their business with, well, what do I need? I need this and I need this and I need this and I need this and I need this, and I can't start until I have all these things. When really there's very little you need to actually start, other than a little bit of willingness and maybe an email address, and then just go and build from there.
Absolutely. And that can be really overwhelming when you're first starting off and thinking, well, I don't have an email list and I don't have a website and how am I going to get all of these different things and how do I write a contract? And it really can be overwhelming. But what's that saying? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It kind of has to be that way. I am very allergic to technology. It gives me headaches. So sometimes it means I'm making my husband do these jobs, and that's okay. Or maybe my best friend is helping me with some of the creative elements. Get your resources and your supports together and just tackle it bit by bit, and we will get there. But another thing that has been really helpful for me as well, and you kind of said that there, why would I put so much effort in if I don't have the clients? This is where my mindset was really, really important, because if I had sat here last February and said, well, I don't have clients and how am I ever going to have clients and there's no work in this field and whatever, I never would have made it here. It's not just going to find you. I had to think big and be a bit delusional and think, I'm going to make this an empire. This is going to be a big business and dream. I had to have those bigger dreams and then start to work backwards as to how can I get there, and that has driven me forward so quickly that it's insane to think of,
And I think that's just such a really important point, is that belief and that trust, that it will happen. And I know it doesn't mean that there weren't wobbles along the way, that when we believe in ourselves and in what can be, that it's not just, putting it out to the universe and making it happen. It also spurs us on to do the actions that will bring us to those places.
Yeah. I love that you've said that, because manifestation has been a huge part of this as well. And it's not just crossing your fingers and making a wish on a star. It's also that aligned action, and checking in with your goals constantly. And what am I doing today to bring myself that bit closer? And am I open to receiving what I'm wishing for, on a lucky star? It's all of it together.
Yeah, it really is. And there was one other thing that you said earlier that I was thinking about, which was around who you are learning from, and that you have found learning from other women and other women in particular who have children, that has been important for you in business. And I think when we talk about that idea of wanting to do all the things as well, these things, they kind of marry together, because if we listen to a lot of kind of males or men in the business world who have been ultra successful, and we listen to the level that they're pitching their advice at and the freedoms of the people that they're pitching their advice to, that's a completely different starting point to most women who are coming into lots of work, but birth work or service-based work in particular. And when we're learning from people who haven't experienced anything even close to what our current experience is it's very hard. It can get really overwhelming because you can feel like you're not doing the right things or you're not doing enough because these other people can do all of these things and I haven't managed to do this one thing.
Absolutely. And it is, you put so much pressure on yourself when you see like, okay, so all I have to do is wake up at 4 a.m. and I have to have like really structured routines, but your kids don't really fall in line with that all the time. And that's, it's just not realistic for women who have children to be following that. So it has been so beneficial for me to learn from women who have been where I am, and who really understand how to grow a business under the similar kind of circumstances. I also will say I have never once woken up before my children. I don't wake up before my children. I go to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Like, I'm not doing anything absolutely insane, to do this. It has to be realistic.
Yeah, it does. And it has to fit into the realities of life and to our commitments, but also, as you mentioned, there was a little bit of playing with those commitments. So, getting childcare, getting cleaners, that type of thing that has freed up some of your time to do some of the work. And just listening to everything that you've said, it's been lovely to hear your passion for the work that you do, but also your excitement about the business and about growing and everything that you're adding in, and to be at the point we are now in a relatively short period of time is just wonderful. But it's a testimony to your commitment and to your passion and to your ability and desire to move forward. So just, well done in everything that you've done. I think your story is really inspiring, will be really inspiring to other people to see what can be achieved when your whole heart is in it while still, maintaining, as you said, a family of 3 children under 6 who were younger as you started this. So Orla, if people want to find out more about your work, where should they go?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I really appreciate it, because not a lot of people understand what it takes to do what I'm doing, and I'm very proud of it and so grateful to be able to work with so many families because of it. So thank you for that kind of acknowledgement. But yes, you can find me on Instagram at Takes a Village Doula. My website is takesavillagedouula.ie as well. And yeah, contact me at any time for even just a chat about any kind of support during pregnancy, birth or postpartum.
Well, thanks very much, and I will put those links in the show notes. So everybody, thank you for listening to our episode today, and we will be back next week with another episode. Bye. Before you go, if anything in today's episode had you nodding along or thinking, yeah, that's me, don't leave it there. My free quiz helps you see what stage your birth is actually at and what's worth your energy right now, so you're not second guessing every decision or following advice that doesn't fit. It'll only take you a minute to complete, so click the link in the show notes and find out your birth biz stage and what your best next steps are.